Do you see enough from Democrats in Washington right now?
You know, I think I agree with so many people who are criticizing the Dems for not playing as unfairly as the Republicans are, which is hard to say that out loud because I'm not an unfair person. But we've got to hit them. You know, Michelle Obama, when they go high, we go low. When they go low, we need to go lower right now. It's out of control.
That was some of my conversation with a Texas voter who weighed in on what he wants to see from Democrats going forward as President Trump gets ready to deliver his State of the Union address tonight. Want to bring in former senior advisor for political engagement to President Biden, John McCarthy. John, I think that voter is someone who I'm going to keep in mind as I'm watching the speech tonight, because as much as this is a chance for Republicans to lay out their midterm message, this is a chance for Democrats to also lay out where they're trying to go, rebutting Trump and also putting out their own agenda, right?
Right, absolutely. And I mean, I will say, thank God we have Abigail Spanberger out there giving the rebuttal tonight, because, you know, in many ways, she represents the new face of the Democratic Party, right? You know, she's a Democrat who won in a state that was previously Republican held. She did it with message discipline. And I think that what you'll see out of her speech tonight is really going to be twofold. First, she's going to pose the very simple question. Like, is Donald Trump focusing on what he told you he was going to focus on? And I think poll after poll has already showed us that that answer is no. But then I also think she's going to give a reminder to voters that they have agency to do something about it. So it's going to be reorienting the Democratic base towards action towards November.
Well, especially as for the president, he's probably wanting to do the same thing, right? I mean, you know what it's like to work in a White House on the cusp of a midterm and do a State of the Union address that requires buy-in from people who are actually going to be on the ballot. So I wonder if you take us behind the scenes on what you imagine some of these conversations look like between the Hill and between the White House, especially as Republicans are super jittery because polling shows they've got a really steep hill to climb in November.
Yeah, I mean, President Trump has a really tough job heading into tonight. Yes, he's going to be speaking to the voters out there, you know, watching on television, but he is speaking to a fractured Republican base in the room. And, you know, yes, it's this big primetime moment, but really in the weeks leading up to it, the people who are sitting in that chamber will have been lobbying the White House, you know, sometimes discreetly, sometimes less discreetly, asking for basically lines in that speech. I mean, every single line that the president delivers tonight is going to be something that has been fought for by agencies, White House staff, and members of Congress.
Yeah, exactly, especially when you consider the fact that we had Ken Thomas here from the Wall Street Journal to start the show, and I said, all right, do you think he's going to stay on message? And he goes, probably not, which this is why it's difficult to put things in this speech when you can't trust that the president's going to actually read every line of the speech.
Exactly. And I mean, every single day he will be spending time with senior advisors and speechwriters working through each and every one of these kind of lines. And the reason it's important is a single mention in a speech like tonight can really give oxygen to a policy idea, right? So, you know, today at the White House, you'll be seeing his team doing discreet calls to members of Congress saying, you know, I think your policy line might make it into the speech tonight. You should be prepared to coordinate on comms with us. The president's political apparatus, both inside the White House and outside, is going to be spending today trying to coordinate with outside groups to validate. Because really tonight needs to be a reset for the president. Things aren't going well. His approval ratings are on the decline. Democrats seem to be on the ascendant in most polling. So this really needs to be kind of a reset moment. So if the speech ends just tonight with kind of negative headlines of chaos, it's a failure for the president.
Yeah, and yet that's the Republican dynamic. If I pivot back to the Democratic side, I continuously talk to voters who feel like they're not seeing enough from Democrats here in Washington. I regularly ask them, too, okay, what would enough look like? And they say, well, I don't know. I just feel like I'm not seeing it yet. Yeah. So for a party that is trying to tell its members in the room, don't be disruptive, try to have silent defiance, maybe don't go at all. A lot of them are skipping it, either because of weather or because they're going to go to a counter rally on the National Mall. I mean, what does fight look like in a room where decorum is chief?
Yeah, I mean, what does fight look like is the defining question right now for Democrats. And how are they going to be both a proactive, you know, policy difference to Trump while also finding meaningful ways to fight back? And I think that there are two exercises here happening inside the Democratic Party. A lot of the members who you're seeing attend kind of counter protests tonight are not necessarily members who are in tough districts. These are places that I think are kind of pandering to the base, you know, showing them that there's energy and fight. I think a lot of the members who are in these tough districts for re-election on both sides of the aisle are going to be present tonight and try to respond in thoughtful kinds of ways, because that's what their voters sent them there to do. So, you know, I think that that's going to be really where the majority makers are inside the Democratic Party. They're probably going to be inside the chamber today, listening to the president and responding thoughtfully.
And yet at the same time, there are some within the Democratic Party that would argue, without us revving up the base, we are nothing, right? And so what does it make, what should we make of the fact that it's Spanberger, not a more hyper-progressive member like a Mamdani giving this response? I mean, is the party apparatus choosing a lane And is that important ahead of a midterm and then, of course, a 2028 presidential that's looming over all of this?
It is important for the party to choose a lane on this. And I think that the governor of Virginia is an important kind of indicator of how we do an addition game here, right? This is about adding more voters into the mix, voters who might otherwise vote for another candidate or stay home. So in choosing someone who kind of flipped a state, focused in on bringing, new voters into her coalition, it's showing that the Democratic Party is making a conscious effort to kind of reattract some of the people who are clearly disaffected by President Trump.
Yeah, and someone who did it on a message that was so centered on affordability. You talk about the discipline in the Spanberger message. That was one of the key facets of it. John McCarthy, thank you for coming on, priming us for what's ahead.